Before we begin this Sunday address, if you are not already subscribed, go ahead and do so now. And if you are subscribed, check and make sure that YouTube hasn't decided to unsubscribe you. It seems on a weekly basis, we get dozens of people who say that they mysteriously found themselves unsubscribed and it wasn't their action. Also, be sure to give the video a like. The white supremacists hate that. Now, that said, by now, I'm sure that most of you are familiar with the tragedy of Breonna Taylor, a young 26-year-old EMT from Louisville, Kentucky, who was murdered in her own home by a gang of white supremacist thugs who had badges. Basically, the local kill squad, and I mean that literally. These guys have a long track record, the individuals who took her life, a long track record of police brutality, excessive force, and violent confrontations that they initiated with the public. But that's not the way the white media is trying to frame this story. Even in a case where a young woman was murdered in her own home, the white media is trying to figure out how to make her the person who's the bad guy. And the main individual who they're trying to paint as the villain of the piece is her boyfriend, Kenneth Walker, who, seeing the woman he loved gunned down in cold blood, decided that he would try to defend himself and to defend her to the best of his ability. Kenneth Walker is who the white media is attempting to accuse of a crime. Even if he did what they allege, there was no crime committed. He took action to protect the woman he cared about. White power hates seeing that. They have been demonizing him and demonizing her posthumously every way that they could, trying to make it where there's some sort of justification for it. Yeah, she's dead, but truth be told, they're not really good people. They don't want that to be the narrative that a black man's defending a black woman, that a black woman is killed and a black man takes up arms to fight back against her killers. The white media hates that. The thugs with badges hate it, and the dominant society hates it. So they are all working together to smear the murder victim, and they're desperately grasping at straws to cast aspersions on Kenneth Walker. Problem is they don't have anything to work with. This is just like the murders of Philandro Castile and Jordan Russell Davis. When you have a victim who you don't have anything to point to, you can't say that, well, he had a brush with the law, or there was some sort of complaint against him. Well, you don't have anything legal that you can point to. What you say instead is, well, there was someone in the area who looked like him. And well, there were rumors that the white media does that. They know that their job is to repeat and to bolster and prop up all of the unqualified, uncalled for killings by the enforcement of white supremacy. The police are already changing their story because they know that they're wrong. They know they got caught, and they know this isn't going away. They had a no-knock warrant when they intentionally and without provocation opened a hail of gunfire on Breonna Taylor's residence and murdered her in cold blood. There was no justification for what they did. No one had fired on them. It's not as if they were encountering any sort of resistance as they tried to smash their way into Breonna Taylor's home. No one had fired on them. They staged an ambush, no different than what the Chicago PD did to Fred Hampton. And this is not the first time that the Louisville police have pulled an ambush like this. Well, this time things didn't go their way. The police falsely claimed that they carried out their murderous attack because this was a drug house and there was a known big-time dope dealer who lived there. And the standard lie that they use. Well, after they murdered Breonna Taylor and after Kenneth Walker put up righteous resistance, wounding one of the race soldiers in his own self-defense. One of these guys who had murdered Breonna Taylor and was now trying to murder Kenneth Walker. Kenneth Walker defended himself. The cops were like, this nigger, he's out of control. Okay, so since this was apparently the Pablo Escobar of Louisville, Kentucky's house that they were shooting their way into, since they had a no-knock warrant because this place was clearly a fortified drug den, what did the cops find? They searched the place and they found nothing. No drugs at all. That should be the headline for every story involving the murder of Breonna Taylor. No drugs found in the house. The white media buries that in their stories. They do not start off with, the police claim that they were raiding a drug house, but there were no drugs found. Instead, they usually bury in the story, if they mention at all. A lot of the white media stories, most of them, in fact, don't even mention, hey, the cops were claiming they were raiding a drug house. There were no drugs found, so the white media just doesn't mention that. And of course, this is meant to do one of two things. Either A, it is meant to lend credence to the idea that, well, they must have found drugs, otherwise the white media would have mentioned there were no drugs. Or it's meant to at least give a talking point to the white supremacist hangers-on and shills out there to say, well, there was a drug house and they must have found something. That's the whole point. They leave a void there. And speaking of deliberate voids that the white media fills with garbage, they start all their stories, their coverage has been, well, what do we know about Kenneth Walker? What do we know about Breonna Taylor? They don't have it as a story of what do we know about the police who killed Breonna Taylor. This is all about, well, we're going to make the victims into the subject here. We're not talking about the police. We're talking about these niggers here. We're talking about them. They're the ones we need to be looking at. They're the victims. But this is the white media's narrative. If a black person is accused of committing a crime, well, it's all about them. We're not going to be talking about the circumstances. We're not going to be talking about the accuser. It's all about them. And if a black person is murdered, same template, the exact same scheme. We're talking about that nigger here, that you must have done something. They know that they can give a slant to the coverage that is meant to fit the profile of, in the public mind, it's meant to imply this is the person who committed a crime. They did something wrong. Breonna Taylor wasn't even the person that these white thugs with badges were trying to kill. She wasn't even the one that they allegedly were raiding the house for. And neither was Kenneth Walker, who the police claimed that they were looking for was some third individual who, thanks to the family of Breonna Taylor's lawsuit, we know the person who they were claiming that they were supposed to be looking for, hunting down so they could kill him. This was a guy who lived like 10 miles away from Breonna Taylor. This wasn't even somebody who lived there. But the cops were saying, well, we need to raid the place because, well, we thought that he had been there at least a couple of times. We thought that he had been there, so we had to shoot the place up. We didn't have a choice but to shoot the place up because we didn't know if the guy was there. See, this is what counts as law enforcement under white supremacy. This is not a police department. This happens to be a kill squad. This happens to be a local death squad. And you have a bunch of white supremacist thugs in the DA's offices and on the bench who are allowing them to operate. And they've been getting away with it for a while, but now they went one kill too far. And the white media realizing, yeah, the tide's turned. We've seen the Jason Van Dykes go up the river, and the Amber Geigers go up the river, and the Michael Slagers, oh, hell. Well, we can't tell the public anymore that, well, it's so hard to convict the police. So we're just going to, since we can't do that, we're just going to hold the line and say our usual garbage. Yeah, it won't help, but we're not changing our tune. That's what the white media has been reduced to. Trying to focus on the victims. We're not mentioning their killers. We're not talking about them. We're trying to make it where you don't have any names or any people to look at because we don't want them to be the focus of the public's ire. We're going to talk about Breonna Taylor, and we're also going to be trying to cast aspersions. We're going to be talking about what the police say. We're not going to be talking about the killers of Breonna Taylor and the would-be killers of Kenneth Walker. We're not going to be talking about them. We're not giving you any information on them. Instead, it's going to be all about, well, she was killed. Well, here's what the police said. The police had a good reason for it. That's what this is meant to mislead the public mind, too. Yeah, they murdered her in cold blood. There were no drugs found. She has no criminal record, no association with any drug dealers or criminals. But you know what? The cops had a good reason for it, though. It was an honest mistake. Sure, it was basically the next best thing to a justified shooting. Why? It was an honest mistake. Neither Breonna Taylor nor Kenneth Walker had any criminal records. The white media looked for them. They were desperately looking for him. It was like, we got to get something on these guys. We got to dirty them up. Neither of them has any sort of drug conviction, no drug charges, no anything. The white media was looking furiously for that. We got to find something. We got to get something on us so we can dirty them up. So the white media was using all of their resources to look for any dirt that they could find on Breonna Taylor, and she's the one who was murdered. She's the murder victim here. Kenneth Walker had to fight for his life and do everything he could to defend the woman who he loved, who was on the ground dead. And the white media is looking at him and going, well, we got to get something on him. We got to find a way to dirty him up. Meanwhile, they're not saying anything about the three white supremacist thugs who took Breonna Taylor's life. The white media has all of these investigative resources at their disposal, but for some reason they can't do any investigations of white supremacist thugs with badges who murder black people. All of a sudden they can't ask any questions, can't get any personnel records, can't look at anything, can't ask anything. Well, thanks to Breonna Taylor's family's lawsuit, here's what we have found out about at least two of these white supremacist thugs. Miles Cosgrove was previously sued for excessive force by a man who he shot in 2006. Truth be told, the man he was trying to kill. So we know this is a guy who's trigger happy. And another one of the thugs, Brett Hankinson, he has a prior history of unnecessary force and corruption within his own police department. And he's been involved in dozens of situations where he's sent citizens to the hospital for injuries ranging from being tased to pepper sprayed and struck repeatedly in the face and the eyes. This is the level of individual who the Louisville PD likes to have on the payroll. They like to have these brutes on the payroll because that's the entire point. You can't have a very effective death squad if they're squeamish about inflicting unnecessary bodily harm. The Louisville PD knows exactly who these scumbags are and exactly what they've been doing, because this is what they were hired to do. This is what they're there to do. They are there to carry out unrestrained, uncalled for excessive brutality and death. That's what they were hired for. That was their entire purpose, and they serve no other purpose. But the white media is not telling you that. They want to leave a void there, and they fill that void with all sorts of police PR lies and spin and misdirection and disinformation. Oh, here's the latest department lie about what they did. And when the department's not lying, they're saying, well, it's an ongoing investigation and there's no comment. You see, if they had had a situation where a black man was accused of shooting the cops and the cops thought they had something they could work with to get some quickie sympathy with the public, they would be releasing everything. Wouldn't be no lies about, well, there's an ongoing investigation we can't talk about. They'd be saying, here's exactly what happened, names, dates, places. Oh, this guy had drug convictions. He was a lifelong crook, and police risk their lives every day to kill these niggers. I mean, to protect the public. And we, every day, we get up thinking about nothing more than killing as many niggers as possible. I mean, to protect the public from all sorts of dangers. And this is what we face every day. And blue lives matter. I mean, blue lives matter. That's the script. They are so predictable about it because they've done it so many times. You know exactly what the truth is because they've lied so many times. The thugs in blue have absolutely no problem whatsoever giving all sorts of comments and information about investigations while they're going on. Hell, while the body's cold on the ground, they got no problem with that when it suits them. But on the other hand, when it doesn't suit them, ongoing investigation, we can't comment. We release body camera footage because we want to be transparent with the public. Hey, here's some footage of a cop shooting a black person 10 times, 1 time in the back, 14 times, 9 times when the person's on the ground. Well, ongoing investigation, we can't comment, can't release any body camera footage. Yeah, whatever happened to transparency? And the white media has been trying to be the PR wing for the thugs in blue, trying to dig up or invent some sort of justification, something, if they can just find something in the past of Breonna Taylor or Kenneth Walker, something you can use to give rhetorical cover and to let the white supremacist shills online and other places say, well, these niggers, they deserve it. They don't have that to work with, so the white media is saying, well, there must be something. Were these really good people, Hey, has anyone ever said anything critical of them? You had a case of one of these white Hispanics who called herself going on some website and writing some smear piece about Breonna Taylor because they didn't actually have any crimes they could point to. They didn't have anything legal that they could point to. So now it's a matter of, well, if we can find anyone who's ever said anything critical about them, we'll go ahead and run with that. We'll run with that if we can. We just need something that we can use, some sort of verbiage that we use, something, just something to give cover to. Something we can use. We've got to push the narrative that this black person deserved to die, that this wasn't a good person. We have to hammer that narrative. They've been going, just grasping at straws, desperate, more and more pathetically reaching for something, realizing that there's nothing there, but this is all they can do. This is what happens when you got these die-hard white supremacists and their non-white allies who are working hand in hand with them. This is what you get. You had politicians give their phony expressions of sympathy and support for the family. Yeah, the governor of Kentucky who's pretending as if he's concerned. You have the mayor of Louisville pretending to be concerned. All of them saying the same thing. None of them pointing out, hey, this is one of the city's employees. This is an EMT, a woman with a squeaky clean record. A young woman shot down in her prime. No drugs found in the house. The police are out of control. Nobody's looking and going, hey, this police department's got big problems and they need to be taken to the woodshed. Heads need to roll on this one. People need to go to prison. This department needs to be run through with Lysol and with criminal indictments because they're so freaking filthy. Nobody's saying that. Instead, it's the same old, well, this is very serious, and the public wants answers. Yeah, you see, whenever you have young black people fighting for their freedom in Baltimore, Barack Obama's saying they're thugs and they need to be indicted and there need to be prosecutions. But whenever you're dealing with white supremacists, especially white supremacists who enact violence against white people, nobody's calling for prosecutions. Nobody's calling for indictments. Nobody's saying people need to go to prison. Crimes have been committed here. Nobody says it's a crime. Instead, it's, there should be an inquiry. We should have an inquiry. We should look into this. That's what the word investigation means. If it's a black person, nobody says investigations. They say prosecutions. Charges should be brought. Whenever you're dealing with non-black people, especially white supremacists, it's investigations, which is just another word for let's pretend to look into it. We'll look into it. We'll investigate, but we ain't charging anybody. This is the kind of discussion the white media doesn't want to take place. White media is trying to figure out, can we gin up some support for the police? Can we get some phony baloney pretend actor Blue Lives Matter activists to get out there and toe the line and say that the police, they do a dangerous job every day. Why, it's hard work killing these unarmed niggers. Protecting the public. They're trying to figure out if they can get something going, and it ain't happening. It's not working this time. Oh, there's plenty of protests against the thugs in blue, but there's nobody supporting them. They understand, we stand at a tipping point. In this case in particular, we'll get to the tipping point that Kenneth Walker represents. Because I've been telling you about the need for a black legal defense fund and how we can turn the tide on this whole thing. With this case, we stand at a potential tipping point. The white media certainly seems to recognize that we stand at a fork in the road, that this is an important incident that could be precedent-setting. Same way that the murder of Trayvon Martin was, we now stand at another tipping point, only this one goes in the favor of black people. White media knows that. The thugs in blue know that. Now, since everybody realizes that the enforcement arm of white supremacists are inveterate liars, and that only a fool, a willing fool, if the police are on the level with it, if the police are telling the truth, why they ought to be eager to release the body camera footage. Every single one of the white supremacist death squad troopers who were there ought to have their body cameras on, and the police ought to be releasing that and say, why, you can see 10 different versions of our story. Why, we call it exactly the way that it happened. Because that's what they do in literally the handful of cases. How many times do you see the police release body camera footage of some killing they carry out? You can literally count the times on one hand and have enough fingers left to drive. They practically never do because they know they're in the wrong. That's the reason why states like North Carolina put out laws saying, you can't release body camera footage at all. If the police are really telling the truth, it ought to be a matter of, hey, the public may not like to see it, but this is what we got to do every day. This is what you got to put up with, and you can't deny that it's justified. But they never do. So that lets you know they understand exactly the lies that they're telling. And this case has been no different. If the police are going to the extraordinary lengths of circumventing the law and getting no-knock warrants, then common sense says that they better make sure that their entire squad, the entire incident is videotaped. Everybody has to be body cameraed up, just in case there's any questions afterwards, because you're showing up in what you have said. We think that this has a high likelihood of becoming a violent incident, a violent encounter where there's going to be a hell of a lot of bullets flying and potentially people getting killed. Well, gee, that fits the very definition of forensic, now doesn't it? And that being the case, it would eliminate all question about use of force or about what happened if you make sure that the department has full video documentation of the raid. After all, this isn't some traffic stop. It's not some event where the police didn't have a chance to prepare for it and just came out of the blue. The police planned out this murderous attack. They went to a judge beforehand and they told the judge this is where the attack's going to take place. This is who we're targeting, though any other black bystanders are also fair game. And this is the location, this is the timing of it, this is who we're after. They told the judge in withering detail, this is who we're going after, this is who we're going to be trying to kill. All the other, if there are any other unarmed black people there, well, we can get them as a bonus. With all this pre-planning, a camera, in fact, a number of cameras is a must because they plan to storm the building, guns at the ready, without even identifying themselves. Now, that's a recipe for a shootout. Why, if the police are so upstanding, if they're so honorable, if they're so decent, if they're so truthful, if they're so honest, if they're so always right and never wrong, then it goes without saying that there's not just one body camera that captured the murder of Breonna Taylor. Hell, every cop on the scene had to have their body cameras on, right? Right? Except they didn't. So out of the dozen or more cops who took part in this murderous assault, not even one of them had a body camera. Not even one. And I don't mean this is just a typical case of, well, there were 10 officers on the scene and all of their cameras had a simultaneous malfunction. By the way, they've done that a number of times in New York, in Philadelphia, and other white supremacist enclaves. The police department will have an incident where a black person has been shot or a black person has been hideously assaulted, and the police will be asked, how many of your officers have body cameras? Well, we all have body cameras. Okay, well, let's see the footage. Well, none of the cameras have any footage of the incident. They all suffered a simultaneous malfunction. And you might wonder, how many times have police been indicted for tampering with body cameras? 0. So that lets you know the DAs and the state's attorneys and the federal government are all in it with them. They're all on the same page. But that's not what happened here, though. With the murder of Breonna Taylor, this wasn't a case of a simultaneous malfunction. The problem was the police didn't have body cameras. According to Stephen Conrad, the chief thug of the Louisville PD, the police chief, the department's death squad, who they call their criminal interdiction division, they don't wear body cameras. It's not a matter of the department doesn't require them to. It's a matter of we don't have these guys. These guys, they don't wear body cameras. Other guys in the department, you can choose whether or not you want to, but not them. If you're in the criminal interdiction division, if you're part of our death squad, you don't wear body cameras. Now, why would you want to have the guys who are carrying out allegedly the department's most dangerous arrests, carrying out the ones that are going to have the most potential for blowback, the most potential for public outrage, the most potential for lawsuits that will go on as far as the eye can see? Why would you have these guys in particular not required to have body cameras on? Special forces wear body cameras. Now, if the special forces go all over the world wearing body cameras, how come you got the hicks in the Louisville PD who don't? There's an entire division of the Louisville Police Department who don't wear body cameras. And it's not because they can't afford them. It's because this squad, they are not allowed to, and it's part of the department's policy. These guys don't wear them. We do not allow them to have body cameras. You're not going to be forcing them to wear body cameras. And what a surprise. It's also the same group whose job it is to go into people's homes, guns blazing. Now, common sense would tell you that raiding people's homes is risky. And in fact, that the police make it their policy that their go-to thugs don't wear cameras, that tells you everything you need to know. You put it together and try to tell me that this was not a premeditated murder that took place. The cops go to a judge and get a warrant that specifically says that they can walk up to your home and just kick in the door and come in guns blazing and not even have to identify themselves first. This is done to give them legal cover for when they kick in the wrong door and kill the wrong people, which happens frequently. The cops go to Breonna Taylor's home, but they don't watch the home first. They don't observe to see if the man that they allege they're after is even there. They don't wait to say, hey, before we carry out this raid, let's wait and see let's make sure he's there first. Because after all, you would think at the very least, clearly the Louisville death squad has absolutely no regard for human life, definitely no regard for black lives. So even to take that out of the equation, don't you think at least you want to make sure that the guy who went through all this trouble to try to perform the arrest of, don't you want to make sure that he's there first? Come on, you've watched every cop show and movie there is out there. You've watched all of these real life reality shows about the police. One thing they point out when it comes to performing some sort of fugitive arrest, first thing you got to do is make sure the guy is there. And there's a common sense reason for that that has nothing even to do with public safety. You want to make sure that the guy actually gets caught. Because if you raid the wrong house, you've let the guy know that you're tracking his movements, you're after him, and that you got this close to him. Well, now he's guaranteed to get away because you helped him get away because you raided the place when he wasn't there. He's going to know that you tried to pinch him, and he's going to be gone in the wind. You talk to any real law enforcement apparatus, you got to go outside the United States to find them. But you talk to any real police and not the white supremacist thugs with badges that you got in the U.S., and what you find is that's exactly how it works in a competent, actual police department, not some bunch of meth-smoking hillbillies in Louisville. They would want to make sure, you would think they would want to make sure that they got their man. So you watch the place and make certain. At the very least, don't you want to have some idea how many people are actually there? Starting with the guy you're allegedly there after, you would think that would be common sense. But they didn't do that. They didn't do any due diligence. They did not observe. They did not surveil the house. They didn't do any sort of stakeout. They didn't care that there were probably children there. Instead, they used a battering ram to smash the door, and they went in gun shooting. In fact, it's thought that they probably didn't even wait that long. Probably started firing from outside the home. They just began indiscriminately shooting, and not just at Breonna Taylor's home, but also the neighbors' homes as well. They were just guns going all over the place. And then they try to white-splain this away afterwards. The first thing that they try to say is they had identified themselves. Why, that's not true. We identified ourselves. We told them, this is the police. Open up. That's what they said, by the way. They said that they did identify themselves before they began shooting. Now, this is obviously a bald-faced lie on its face. Why the hell would you go through all the trouble of getting a no-knock warrant if you intended to announce yourselves all along? Well, our plan was we were going to announce ourselves. We had no intention of just running up to the front door and smashing it in with a battering ram. Why? We did identify ourselves. Then why the hell would you get a no-knock warrant? What do you need a no-knock warrant for? And this is a woman whose home, this woman works for the freaking city. This is not some gangbanger or some sort of hardened criminal, not like the thugs in the Louisville PD. They're hardened criminals. Breonna Taylor was a law-abiding. Well, this is probably low likelihood of needing some no-knock anything. But they're so busy trying to cover themselves, they're so busy trying to figure out how do we duck and dodge and quell the public outrage that they see growing by the day, and it's not going away. In the middle of a coronavirus pandemic, you got the black community saying, we're going to get these guys punished for this. And they're so busy trying to lie their way out of it. We knocked them. Why? We announced ourselves. We announced ourselves. Really? So that's why you went and got a no-knock warrant. Because your entire plan was you were going to announce yourselves all along. They can't even get their lies straight. The police disinformation statement was that they needed a no-knock warrant because, quote, these drug traffickers have a history of attempting to destroy evidence. Now, notice that they put that first. When it came to a no-knock warrant, they did not put these drug traffickers have a history of opening fire on us the moment that they see us coming, or the moment that we announce ourselves, they have a history of opening fire on us. That's not front of mind for them for justifying a no-knock warrant. They didn't start off with, we're concerned that these guys, if we announce ourselves as the police, they're going to open up on us with everything they got. We're going to be walking into a freaking hail of bullets. That's not what they said. This is the police's own words. And I've told you that when it comes to people speaking, they tend to focus first on saying what's at the front of their minds. What's most important to them is what they tend to come out with first. And the first thing that the white supremacist thugs in blue, the local death squad in Louisville, said was, these drug traffickers have a history of attempting to destroy evidence. So that's what was at the front of their minds. That was top of mind for them. Why? We don't want these niggers trying to get rid of any evidence. Okay, well, surely the secondary justification for a no-knock warrant is going to be concern about walking into a shooting gallery, right? Wrong. The secondary justification that they gave was that these drug traffickers have cameras on the location that compromise detectives once an approach to the dwelling is made. So that's their second justification. It's not getting shot, it's, well, we think that these guys could have cameras. So far, I'm waiting to hear the part about these guys could open up on us with a whole bunch of assault rifles and pistols and bombs and bazookas. Still waiting to hear that. Haven't gotten to it. Okay, well, they got a third reason listed. Surely this is the part about the guns, right, and getting shot up. Nope. Third part is these drug traffickers have a history of fleeing from law enforcement. So that's pretty much it. That was the police's justification for their no-knock warrant. They were scared that the alleged, and now we know non-existent drug dealers at Breonna Taylor's residence, the imaginary drug dealers that only existed in the death squad's white supremacist rancid imagination, they were scared that these imaginary non-existent drug dealers were going to destroy the drugs that weren't even there. They were concerned that, well, these guys could have cameras on the location. Well, didn't you check to see? Didn't you do any sort of stakeout or surveillance so you could check and see what kind of cameras you got? That's supposed to be standard operating procedure for any sort of group, so-called law enforcement or military, that calls themselves performing some sort of dynamic entry. That means raid. You're supposed to surveil the place and see, do we see any cameras present? Any security cameras? Anything? Anything that would make it where the bad guys could have eyes on us? Did they even check? No. If they did check, that means that they're lying. They lied in their no-knock warrant application. And finally, have a history of fleeing from law enforcement. Gee, isn't that supposed to be what you surround the target domicile for? You're supposed to that's one of the things that the police do, by the way. And you've seen it yourself. Whenever they come up to serve a warrant on somebody or to perform an arrest, what they'll do is they'll have an officer or two at the back of the house or at the back of the apartments or what have you. And the reason why is because they know that the guy, once he sees the police at the front, there's an even chance he's going to try to go out the back. So they want to make sure that there's an officer at the back too. They don't just send one guy to perform an arrest. On TV they do, but in the real world they don't. I've seen it myself, by the way. You'll have 2 or 3 cops at the front door and a couple of cops at the back. So the 3 reasons the police gave, none of these hold any water. They all fall apart as soon as you look at them because none of these apply to the situation. And even if they did, what these guys did would not have had any bearing on this whatsoever. No, the reason that you have a no-knock warrant is you want to make sure that you get the drop on anyone who might have a gun inside. But what if you're raiding a place that has unarmed people? Well, this is going to be our get-out-of-jail-free card. Well, that and the department making sure that no officers wear body cameras when you work in the local death squad unit. That's their guarantee. No body cameras, so there's no footage. And just in case anybody's asking, what are you doing kicking indoors? Well, we got a warrant to do that. And when we occasionally kill some unarmed person, even if it's an EMT for the city, well, it's going to be the word of the cops, white cops, versus the dead black person. And we all know how that goes, don't we? If the drug dealers have cameras on the premises, then doesn't it make sense that the police should have cameras of their own? This way, should one of their murderous raids be so egregious that it simply can't be covered up, at least the drug dealers won't be the only ones with video of the incident, right? All the drug dealers' cameras are going to be pointed outside. They certainly won't have cameras pointed at their drug operation. They're not going to document their own illicit narcotics operation. So the drug dealers would have all of their alleged cameras pointing outside where the cops are. So the only actual irrefutable evidence that the amount of force or the actions taken in a raid would be justified would have to come from the police themselves, because it damn sure wouldn't come from the drug dealers, right? So if you're a trigger-happy gang of racist thugs, you don't want a situation where the only visual evidence is you and the rest of your gang approaching a home in a residential area, guns drawn. Because if you don't wear body cameras, that's the only video evidence anyone will ever see. But of course, as the enforcement arm of white supremacy, the cops make sure to confiscate all video cameras of the places they attack. That's what they did with Laquan McDonald. When they murdered Laquan McDonald in the street, they immediately began running around to all of the businesses on that street, on that avenue, and tell them, give over your video cameras. We know you had evidence of the murder. Hand them over. Hand over the video. That's what they did. They do that routinely, by the way. They start running around to any businesses or places that look like they got surveillance cameras until you got to hand over the video. We just killed some black person in the streets, and we need to make sure that there's no evidence. So, as usual, the thugs with badges are lying when they claim that they were all worried about the drug dealers having cameras. The police are actually worried that when they go hunting for a black person to murder, that there's going to be evidence that could put them away. That the white media doesn't question or impugn what are clearly obvious lies. Instead, the white media tries to enforce those lies and prop them up. And if they don't have any lies to work with, as we've seen with the case of that white Hispanic reporter who tried to smear Breonna Taylor, well, they try to make some lies up. And that's what they've been reduced to. Well, her work history, she's not applying for a job. She's dead. And Kenneth Walker, they tried the same kind of feeble attempts. Well, that Kenneth Walker guy, he was there in her home, but he's listed as his residence being elsewhere. So that's usually what happens when you have two unmarried people who happen to be in a relationship. One of them's going to live in one place and the other person's going to live somewhere else. Are these crimes? They're taking stuff that's not even crimes and trying to figure out, well, what was he doing there? He's in a relationship with her. That's usually how it works. Yeah, except that's the whole point. As a black man who actually defended himself and the woman he cared about, well, we gotta make sure people understand this guy, he's a criminal. And if we can't find any crimes, we'll just talk about his life as a crime. He got out of bed this morning. What was he doing out on the streets, out of bed? This guy, he ate cornflakes this morning. Now, why would he be eating cereal? This is the white media doing this. Smearing a woman who, by the way, no criminal record, no drug charges, no anything, a law-abiding citizen, more than we can say about her murderers. You can't sit there and say that the killers of Breonna Taylor are law-abiding citizens. We at least know that Miles Cosgrove and Brent Hankinson, we know that those two bastards have a long-standing history of brutality and lawlessness. So you see the white media working to try to justify her murder after the fact. Same way they've done with all the other victims of police killings. They can't say that there were drugs there. They can't say that she was the person the police were after. So they're trying to manufacture a false association in people's minds. They're trying to dirty them up by innuendo. You don't have any crimes to point to. So what was Kenneth Walker doing there? He's domiciled somewhere else. He's listed as having another residence. What was he doing at her place? How is that even something to talk about? What does that have to do with anything? It's certainly not a crime, not even wrong. So why even bring it up and try to paint it as, well, it's suspicious that he would be there. What was he doing there? The old white supremacist talking point, well, if the nigger didn't do this, they certainly did something else. Or at the very least, they deserve it because they're black and they're seedy and there's something wrong with them. But we, of course, know what the real crime here is. The real crime is that Breonna Taylor was black and so is Kenneth Walker. That's the real crime. white media has spent hundreds of years manufacturing the societal fiction that the killing of a black person, especially by the thugs in blue, is never a crime and is not to ever be punished. And if a black person defends themselves, that is always, especially if you defend yourself from a police attack, that's a guaranteed prison sentence. They need to have the public mind, hey, when that happens, that guy's supposed to go to prison no matter what. That's supposed to be automatic. That's how you try to condition society to become a machine to reinforce and support white supremacy. You got to brainwash and indoctrinate people with the idea that, hey, you are not to defend yourself against the police no matter what. They come and kick in your door and murder your woman. You don't do anything about that. You just better hope they don't shoot you too. But there's another reason why the murder of Breonna Taylor and the self-defense carried out by Kenneth Walker happens to be especially irritating for the white media and the thugs in blue and their hangers-on in society. It's another reason why they're frustrated by this and angry by this and why this is precedent-setting, potentially precedent-setting. You see, there's also another black man involved in this incident, somebody else who has also been heroic and courageous and who deserves all the support and praise that we can give. I'm talking about Judge Olu Stevens. You've heard of Judge Stevens before. This is the man who disqualifies juries if he sees that the prosecutors are trying to racially purge the jury pool of black potential jurors. He's the guy who made headlines for that, saying, hey, I can see that you are racially profiling the jurors. You're using your peremptory challenges in order to strike all the black jurors. And that being the case, this jury is no good. You got to get one that's got some black people on there. I see what you're trying to do. And you have these idiots going, this nigger, he's trying to stop our black incarceration racket. We got to get this nigger out of here. So far, they have failed. Well, Judge Olu Stevens, he is doing his job. He is upholding the law, and he is adhering to and faithfully upholding his oath to uphold and support justice. Equal justice under the law. He is not treating the white supremacist thugs in blue as super citizens with rights beyond those of mere mortal men, and certainly rights above black people, and that black people have no rights. Why 90% of convicting a black person is accusing them of no crime. Not in Judge Stevens' court, and that's the way it's supposed to be. Judge Stevens is applying the law equally. So when Kenneth Walker was arraigned, he stood before Judge Stevens. And Olu Stevens looked at the case. He looked at Kenneth Walker's background and said, this is a man whose home was barged in by a bunch of white supremacist gun-toting thugs who murdered his woman right in front of him. And this man defended himself. He has no criminal record. This guy has no problems. There's no issue. And even if he did, it can't be worse than what the police routinely release people for. And this guy, he's not a flight risk. Put him in jail for what? He didn't do anything wrong. He broke no laws. He's certainly innocent until proven guilty. Well, what's he been accused of? Well, the cops barged into his home, guns blazing, and we say that he shot somebody in the leg. He shot one of the intruders in the leg. Well, they barged into his home, and they didn't even announce themselves. What was he supposed to do? If they had announced themselves, he wouldn't have done it. This is a law-abiding citizen. This man is defending his home and defending his woman. What the hell crime is there? So Judge Stevens said, you know what? This is obviously an honest man. He's a good person, not like the thugs in the Louisville PD. Let this man be released ROR on his own recognizance. This is clearly a law-abiding citizen who the police made the mistake of trying to murder. And we'll let this be sorted out in court. But in the meanwhile, this man, he's no flight risk. He's no danger to the public. He's never been in danger before, so why is he going to turn danger now? And the police are furious. See, they don't want any bricks taken away from that wall. Why, you got a judge who decides that he's going to apply the law equally, and then when white supremacist thugs raid a place, we caught this nigger calling himself, defending himself from a white supremacist attack. You better put this nigger in prison. The judge says, nope, let the guy go. He'll have his day in court. White media is not looking and saying, hey, why would the judge do that? Instead, it's a matter of, they just say, well, police unions are furious. Yeah, the same police unions who cheerlead for the murder of unarmed black people all the time. They're angry. Seems to me that is justice. The police are angry because they don't want to see this precedent being set. They don't want to see black people actually defending themselves. And they damn sure don't want to see any judges, certainly not black judges, who decide that they won't do like Tandy the Manny. They don't want to see black judges who look and say, let's apply this as if this was any other case with any other defendant. If you heard about some guys in the neighborhood who called themselves kicking in the door of an innocent woman and her boyfriend, and the boyfriend actually takes up arms to defend him and his woman, what would you say? Well, what I would say is, why is there even a trial? Is the first thing I would say. And secondly, well, if there is going to be a trial, this guy doesn't belong in any sort of prison cell. He's a law-abiding citizen. And that's exactly what Kenneth Walker is. The white media wants to create a narrative that there's good guys and bad guys here. Well, we know who the good guys are. It's Kenneth Walker. He's the good guy here. Damn sure ain't the Louisville PD. Human beings learn by repetition. And repetition is the mother of learning. That's how human beings learn. Or at the very least, this is how human beings are taught. Big difference. People have to be programmed through repetition, through seeing something over and over again, being told something over and over again. People have to be programmed not to react to injustice, because typically the natural reaction people have is when they see something that's unfair, unjust, unequal, their natural impulse is to intervene, to restore balance. Human beings believe in balance. It is literally hardwired into us. We have two eyes. We have two ears. You can say, well, you've only got one nose. Yeah, but your nose has a left and a right nostril. Well, you got one mouth. Yeah, but your tongue has two sides. Well, you only got one brain. Yes, but your brain has a left hemisphere and a right hemisphere. Well, you've only got one heart. Yes, but your one heart has two upper chambers and two lower chambers. You see where I'm going with this. The idea of balance, it is literally hardwired into our biology. So when we see imbalance, we feel compelled to bring something resembling equality and balance to it. You have to be programmed not to follow that biological imperative. Society has to be programmed to just sit on their hands and accept seeing people who they know to be murderers being allowed to walk because the racists happen to be both the DAs and the judges, and they're telling you, well, you know, this is the only system you got, and you better not